Hello, and thank you for joining. My name is Jennifer Hill, an education specialist at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's National Conservation Training Center in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. In addition to hosting broadcasts, I have the honor of coordinating the Native Youth Climate Adaptation Leadership Congress, a week-long on-site program for Indigenous high school youth to grow in leadership, which we welcome you to learn more about. Before moving into our broadcast, I would like to acknowledge that the National Conservation Training Center is located on the unceded ancestral lands of many Indigenous peoples. While we've not found a full account, we are aware that many peoples traversed, cherished, and lived on this land. They include the Massawamek, the Haudenosaunee, the Shawnee, and the Delaware. As we learn more about the Indigenous peoples who continue to have relationships with this land, we better appreciate the good earth on which we work, live, and learn. And we pledge to grow and sustain relationships with Indigenous communities through collaboration on our training, outreach, youth programs, museum exhibits, and more. And we encourage you to learn more about the land on which you work and reside. Today, we will hear from Maria Carrillo, who is the Assistant Tribal Liaison for the National Park Service's Northeast Region, and she hosts the National Working Group, Tribal Engagement and Climate Change for the National Park Service. She also has worked as a disaster analyst on Maui and in Belgium, and as a lecturer of anthropology at Virginia Commonwealth University and the University of Richmond. Maria's career with public lands has included work with cultural communities in Hawaii, the Pacific Northwest, California, the Intermountain Region, and now the Northeast Region. Her research and stewardship interests include the intersection of culture and climate change, including mitigation in response to natural and anthropogenic hazards. Maria, we're grateful to have you join us today, and I now will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be invited today and really grateful to have this opportunity to speak to a larger DOI section and Fish and Wildlife folks. I work very briefly for Fish and Wildlife in Ventura to get my permanent status as an admin assistant and just have a real great deal of respect for the work that the Fish and Wildlife Service does, and in particular with our cultural communities. I wanted to start just to tell you a little bit about myself and how I got into this work, because whenever I meet people who do similar work, I'm always super curious as to how we got into that. So I thought I would give you some background, and starting with this slide, which the slide you see before you right now is images of as an image of Pueblo ruins at Chaco Culture National Park. And I did do a workshop there, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation, last year with some cultural tribal groups and also with other subject matter experts from throughout the National Park Service and USGS. I began as a lowly inter-park ranger at Mount St. Helens when I was just 19 years old. So very lucky, got into the Forest Service at a very young age, and started working with volcanoes and people. I was at the same time doing doing a degree in anthropology. I ended up getting 2 degrees in anthropology, both in cultural anthropology. And by the time I was writing my master's thesis, I had decided that I really wanted to integrate culture and disaster in some way. And so ended up writing my thesis on how cultures respond to disaster and doing that sort of research. Fast forwarding to today, I'm now a tribal liaison with the National Park Service. I was able to work, as Jennifer stated, on Maui with the Pacific Disaster Center, and work in Belgium doing culture and climate related projects and doing disaster analysis. If we can go back to the image of the, back to the image of the of Chaco culture there. So this is an image produced by my colleague Dan Ledbetter, And it just serves as an example of how culture is, how cultural and cultural objects are impacted by climate change, and why myself and other colleagues continue to do the work that we do. As you can see here, what you see is a partial pueblo. It's a lot of it has fallen down. It is still part of the iconic imagery of that landscape, and it is part of the workshop I did about a year ago. And again, we'll talk about that a little further down. But just to show you how environmental factors, climate change in particular, can wear down these buildings and cultural artifacts. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk a little bit about types of engagement with tribes and cultural communities. There are so many ways to do this, and the Tribal Engagement and Climate Change Working Group, which I host, is just one of those. So I wanted to just show you some of the spectrum of what the National Park Service does when it comes to climate change. This is an image from the Rock Your Mocks event from courtesy Grand Canyon. It's from a few years ago, to be really honest. I don't know the exact date. But just to show that, really, what's really important is to have relationships established with tribal communities, and to make sure that if you're at a park or at a refuge, that people are invited to your site of work, and that also you're able to go to their place of or their home. So if you're able to go to the reservation, if you're able to go to a powwow, and in an informal stage, you can start building these relationships. And at first, when I started this job, I have to admit I was a little bit disappointed that I wasn't doing as much climate change work as I thought. And then I realized, what is super important is building these relationships and making sure that the parks know how to communicate with our tribal partners, and making sure that the tribal partners have an understanding of our need to curate the public lands, and really assist them in doing that. So there's several ways you can go about collaborating with tribal partners, several ways in which tribal partners can reach out to us as public lands agencies too. And I just wanted to go over a few of those before I start talking too much in depth about the Tribal Engagement and Climate Change Working Group. So workshops and trainings, always, I've seen this done on a park level where people just, are able to sign up for one event or get funding for one event sometimes, or do a stewardship day, what have you. Trainings with tribal partners. Co-stewardship agreements, I'll talk a little bit about right now, and then not get too much into the weeds on further. But if you're a resource manager or somebody working for a public agency, and you would really like to involve your tribal partners or your traditionally associated communities or groups to do climate change projects with you, or any type of projects with you, it's really useful, can be really useful from the beginning, to have what's called a co-stewardship agreement, so that if any and every activity that happens on public land, you know when to reach out to your tribal partners. If they find a cultural artifact or a cultural landscape significance, and if any impacts are there, that you can reach out to them if there is a disturbance or some sort of degradation to the land due to a cultural impact, or due to a climate impact, excuse me. And those co-stewardship agreements, that's the meat and potatoes of what I do. Co-stewardship and coaching parks on consultations of how to interact with tribal partners. Those co-stewardship agreements, we now have a mandate through this administration to be doing those. They can be useful, though, as ongoing documents to use in perpetuity with your tribal partners, with culturally affiliated groups. People often ask me, Maria, I really have this tribe or this community that wants to work with me, but I don't have federal recognition for them. What can I do? You can still write up a co-stewardship agreement or some type of agreement showing that the park has a relationship with that group. They don't necessarily have to be federally recognized for you to work with them. but it is really important to be able to have that somewhere in writing so that you have that relationship acknowledged and to utilize that. One of the other things we're doing specifically here, I work in the Northeast region, is we are currently working to train tribal community members to work as archaeologists and as curators. They can take that training and come to a public lands agency with it, or they could take it back to their own tribe and work with it. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. And then informal working groups like my own, like the Tribal Engagement and Climate Change Working Group, which is really actually very informal, and we're really just starting to get a larger audience. And again, grateful for Jennifer to allow me to speak today, because this is why I'm here, is to really explain to you a little bit about what we do, but also your options for collaborating with tribes if you work for a land management agency, and if you're a tribal member, ways that you can reach out to us to figure out what, if you have a project that you'd like to do on your reservation, or even just in conjunction with Park Service. If you have historical land within public lands, how to collaborate and how to reach out with the folks that may be able to collaborate to work on projects with you. Next slide, please. So I've been in a tribal liaison / cultural anthropologist capacity for about 2 years with the Park Service. Before that, for many years, I was in an interpretive capacity. But in between that interpretive time and now, I did work as a disaster analyst for a not-for-profit on Maui, and then for-profit in Belgium. And when I came back and I got back into NPS, the climate change response program was there, and it was something that did not exist when I first started with parks. So I was very excited to see this group. If you Google that, you can just Google climate change NPS and you will find them. They do a number of workshops and trainings, and the one that I was involved in was based at Chaco culture and Aztec ruins. And I went out with a number of other experts to talk to tribal community members about what they'd like to see happen with the thousands of ruins that exist between Chaco culture and Aztec ruins. The difficulty in this is that we have this mandate within the Park Service to preserve and to conserve, and for some tribal community members, this is challenging, because these pueblos, these ancient lands, belong, ancient lands and the buildings on them belong to the ancestors, and or belong to Mother Nature, or were inhabited maybe only for a short period of time and not really meant to be inhabited for a long period of time. So the tribal members who participated in the workshop training with me at Chaco Culture, had a vast array of opinions on this. It's not easy to say that a tribal member is going to have one holistic view on this, and that it's going to be okay, preserve everything or don't preserve everything. There's a spectrum in between. And so I was able to do this workshop. The unfortunate thing about the workshop is that it was timed right as sort of we were coming out of pandemic restrictions, and at the same time there was a huge tribal event that same weekend that the climate change response program was not aware of. So if you are looking to set up something with tribal partners, make sure to have that communication in advance. Make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row, and that you've had at least a couple meetings beforehand with the people that you would like to attend this, because really the idea is to engage as many voices as possible in this. And we were given 3 examples of different types of pueblos that you might see. One were the high visitation pueblos, where people just came daily on a regular basis and they're part of the pull of the park. The other were pueblos that were, further afield, but relatively intact, and that maybe we did not want to grant access to those. And then there were some that there were some that were there was one that was completely just fallen into a wash. So we were given these three examples, and then we went and chatted with the tribal community members as to what they would like to see done with these three different examples, where we could preserve and where we could let it go back to Mother Nature or let it go back to the ancestors. And so it was really important to have that conversation. That conversation occurred over 3 days. It was not a consultation, and I want to express the difference between that, because a consultation can be either informal or formal, and an informal consultation can be just sort of a discussion about what you'd like to see inside a public lands unit or a park unit. Formal consultation, of course, does require tribal leadership and park leadership to show up. Superintendents must be a part of every consultation. And if you're at a wildlife refuge, that's your refuge manager, must be part of these consultations. And that's because that's a government to government relationship. It is specifically dealing with specifically dealing with putting up these co-stewardship agreements, or maybe other agreements like a memorandum of understanding that are legally binding. This workshop was really basically more like, I guess you could call it a sort of a gauge of opinion, and it got written into a larger document that was published by Chaco Culture just a few months ago. Actually, they just managed to wrap that up. So doing those workshops and trainings is just is one way to do things, and then I'll go into trainings on the next slide, please. Another example of engaging tribal communities on public lands is doing special trainings and workshops. And since I've come to the Northeast region, I've been really blessed to be in a region that is very active in this and very engaged in wanting to have tribal partners trained up. Not exactly the same as an NPS training, but similar to an NPS training, so that we can work together on lands that might be national parks now, but were once traditional lands. So especially in a changing climate, archaeological sites are really susceptible to environmental change. Any little rainstorm sometimes can wash things loose. What also comes up is I was the NAGPRA coordinator for a little while for both Intermountain Region and substituted in a little bit in Northeast Region. What also can happen during a climate event is, unfortunately, bones of ancestors can be revealed. And so it's really important for us to have those relationships, those working relationships with tribal communities, so that we know automatically who to call should that happen, and automatically what the process would be, because that can vary from tribal community to tribal community. Just an example of some of the work we've done last year and this year. Last year, we started the tribal specialist training in conjunction with Westchester University, and we're able to get a small cohort of Native American youth trained up in archaeology. And that was in conjunction with Westchester University, the Delaware Tribe of Indians, the Stockbridge-Munsee Tribe of Indians, and the Delaware Nation. So we were able to get a small cohort from that. One person carried over into the next year and was able to then help train the next cohort of archaeological trainees, which happened at Gateway National Park this last year. And they were actually able to engage and assist with doing the park's Section 106 work, which is work that we are required to do at every national park where there is cultural heritage. So it enabled them to both A, get some work done that the park needed to do, and then B, really provide that training, that hands-on training to tribal partners, and for them to be able to see what that compliance and work looks like. So if this is something that you're seeking to do either within your agency or within your within your unit, or if you're external and you're looking to partner with your local unit, I would just recommend, if you're external, just head over to your local park or local refuge and talk to somebody and say, hey, I've heard about this. Are you doing any archaeology on your site recently? Or if you'd like to start a collaboration, what sort of things that are important to you that are on that landscape. We are just now, the Northeast region, just had our first ever meeting in March, where I sat in for my boss on the natural resources and cultural resources groups meeting together. So we are starting to do a lot more too with natural resources. And there are folks that are attempting to really engage tribal communities in that way too, and making sure we have people in tribal communities trained up as natural resource specialists so that they're able to work on various projects throughout the parks, able to work on traditional lands within their parks. And so that program is really growing. And actually at the next Tribal Engagement and Climate Change Working Group meeting, I will have some folks from natural resources there to talk about what they do and how they're hoping to engage tribes in future capacity with their ongoing projects. Next slide, please. So that brings me to where I landed with this Tribal Engagement and Climate Change Working Group. It was started, I just had a chat with Pam Benjamin, and she said, I think it was about 8 years ago that it started, but she wasn't really sure. So Pam Benjamin, who is a ecologist in the Intermountain Region, started this group because she really saw a need for tribal partners and the Park Service to collaborate. So Pam is one of only 2 staff members that work specifically in climate change in the Intermountain Region. Tom Ollard actually just retired, so she's now a party of 1. So if you are in the Intermountain Region and you are trying to get some assistance on your projects, please do be patient. Pam is very busy. In fact, she's so busy that just over a year ago, she asked David Goldstein to run this group, and David Goldstein was busy, so he asked me if I would assist in running this group. So I do currently run the group with my former colleague from Intermountain Region, Kim Greenwood. I know she just presented a short while ago for you, just to show you how integrated our work is. There are just a few of us working in this cultural anthropology / tribal liaison capacity within national parks, and we all know each other, and we all work on very similar projects. So we are an informal working group that has been in existence for approximately 8 years. When I first started, there were about 50 members in this group, and about 12 people would show up regularly. And I thought, well, that's really great, but I'd really like to expand some capacity. And I started meeting some folks at BLM, and I started meeting, as I was doing some of the tribal work in Intermountain Region, would meet tribal partners and said, hey, would you at all be interested in coming to this? And so every time somebody said yes, I added their name to my email list. And I'll invite you to do the same after this presentation. Feel free to, the way that you join the Tribal Engagement and Climate Change Working Group is you email me and I add you to the list, and it's just that simple. So we have now grown to around 200 participants and around 40 people that contribute at most meetings. So the average participation is usually about 40. We currently meet bi-monthly, but we are undergoing some changes with this exponential growth. Our last meeting started dividing us into cohorts so that we can work on some projects individually and really bring more to the table. And what I'm hearing from this group, in facilitating this group, I really wanted the group to speak for themselves. I wanted them to feel represented, not only within a Park Service space, but just to do the projects and work that they feel that they're passionate about. And so we are currently in the process of renaming the group to make it just a a little more culturally appropriate and also to reflect the participation of the folks that are there. So before the next group meeting, we will have a poll vote to see if this name sticks or if we choose another one. And so what has happened is, as this group has exponentially grown, resource managers, we have now resource managers from BLM, Bureau of Land Management, BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs. We've even had the Earth to Sky program, which is a network sharing capacity between NPS, National Park Service, and NASA. We've had folks join from there. We have folks from the United States Geological Survey, CASC, which is the Climate Adaptation Science Centers. So we're really happy to have them on, as they do really specific projects regionally. And we have, I think like 2 of the 5 regions represented right now as far as the CASCs go within the climate change working group. So what I seek to do is to create this informal space in which people can meet each other and talk about the projects that they're passionate about. And what I really heard from people in these last couple of meetings is that they really want this to just not be a lip service group. They don't want to just talk about climate change or have experts come in and talk about climate change and take this sort of woe is us attitude to just listening to the maybe some sad stories about what's happening, as these disasters continue to occur, and they occur in a larger capacity, such as Hurricane Laura, which you can see the image of there. We now have climatologists from various universities that are also in the working group. And so all these folks are just really, really excited to work with tribal partners. And so if you are a tribal partner, please feel free to reach out to us. I do not discriminate as far as, like, people said, oh, well, you only have chiefs or you only have THPOs, which is the Tribal Historic Preservation Officers. No, we don't. Everybody who has an interest in this and has a willingness to collaborate with others is welcome to the group. I want to make sure that the discussions stay open and that people are engaged in projects that they want to be a part of. So we invite members of Indigenous nations. We do have we don't have people from Indigenous groups yet participating from Hawaii, but we do have some park partners participating from Hawaii. So we've started to grow our program a bit to include both Alaska and Hawaii. And those groups are viewed separately, at least according to National Park Service guidelines. As far as Indigenous peoples goes, there's Native Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Alaskan Natives. And but everybody within those communities is welcome to join. And if anyone out there is from Guam, you are welcome to join as well. We really want to make sure that people have a voice at the table. And one of the things we're deciding to do is, if we're going to establish a breakout second group to maybe address some of the Pacific region a little more and be within that capacity. As I already said, we have professionals from many different agencies contributing now. We just picked up a couple of people from University of Oklahoma and the Climate Adaptation Science Centers. We have collaborators from University of Texas now coming on as well. A lot of people that have the knowledge base and really wish to share it. So again, we're happy to have you if that's something you'd like to be a part of. We are currently looking to expand collaboration, particularly from tribal partners. What I find in my work, and what many of my colleagues find, is that our tribal partners are exceptionally busy. And I'm sure for those of you that are tribal members, and for those of you that work with tribal members, you're completely aware of this. And I also realize that it's Native American Heritage Month. You had many different events to come to today, and I appreciate you coming to this one. I do want to acknowledge that we have some interesting events to stay engaged and involved with the Native American communities within the Park Service. Last week was Rock Your Mocks Week, which was if you had a pair of moccasins, you were to wear them to work, or just wear them in general. And then yesterday was Red Shawl Day, which which observes the missing and murdered Indigenous women's movement. So so there's a lot going on this month as far as Native American affairs go. And if that's something that you're seeking to get more involvement with, please feel free to reach out to your local NPS unit or your local public lands unit. Ask if they have a tribal liaison, or ask if they've got some events going on that you can be a part of. We've still got 10 days left in Native American Heritage Month. I think I spoke a little bit faster than I intended to, so that is currently all I have today, but I'm happy to address any questions or comments that may be out there.
Thank you, Maria. We'll see if any questions come in. But I would be interested to hear, while we're waiting for questions, what have been some of your biggest learning challenges in your working group so far? Or maybe like learning curves, or...
Because it is not a truly formal group, and I would really like people to participate whenever and as they can, it means that almost different people are coming up almost each segment. So I'm not getting feedback, I guess I would say. I get feedback from one group of folks that are on a call, and then I basically ask the same question and get feedback from another group of folks. And so, as it's a really diverse working group, sometimes it's like really heavy Park Service attendance one meeting, and maybe really heavy USGS members at the next meeting. So sometimes there's not as much of that interagency and intertribal communication as I'd like, as that it just maybe folks just weren't able to attend that session. But the advantage of doing it this way is that it remains an ongoing conversation, so that if somebody comes in late or has to miss a meeting, I do always make notes for the meetings. We don't video them, so that people can feel free to say what they need to say and be heard. So we do not video these sessions, and we like folks to just be able to participate in that way. So the benefit is it remains this ongoing sort of flowing liquid conversation. The drawback can be is that every meeting can be wildly different from the previous one, and there may not be that connection, that consistency. And so as we're growing, that's something that I am seeking to get from members, and that's why I broke just this last meeting. I started breaking people into cohorts and saying, okay, look, folks who want to do these organizational things, please help me out, because I'm one person and I've been doing it all. So.
Yeah. And do you have somebody kind of apprenticing in your footsteps or following in your footsteps that's shadowing you on these meetings that could kind of take the lead of this cohort if you moved along or something like that? I'm always looking for like depth in programs.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to let you know, full disclosure here, I may be accepting another position, but I'm going to continue hosting this group. So that is something that I ensured I would be part of, from switching to one position to the next. And then also Kim Greenwood does co-host with me. So if I'm not able to make it, she'll take over. And then the people that have been involved, I've been told it's a really great cooperative working group for them. So they've been really involved, really engaged. And I know that there's at least 2 or 3 people that I could call on and say, hey, you've been to most of the meetings. Do you mind, if for instance, I had to schedule something differently or miss something, that there's somebody that could step in. And definitely with the amount of collaboration and interest we've gotten in this group, there are, I feel pretty comfortably 3 or 4 people that I could call upon to continue this work if I needed to step away. And the only way I would see stepping away is if now that we've become in our agency, is if, I moved out of the federal government altogether. So we are looking for consistency and perpetuity in this group.
Nice. That is one of the important things, as I'm sure you're very aware of, working with tribal communities, indigenous communities, when we're in the federal government, is finding that consistent thread and keeping that relationship going.
And that has been the most rewarding part about it. I still have tribal partners from Intermountain Region that tell me, look, Maria, I haven't been able to make it to like the last 10 meetings, but I've been reading your notes. And I'm still interested, and please let me know where I can fill in. And that is the great part of this. What I was saying earlier is that this group has really decided they want to become a project-based group. And for that, what we'll be looking to do, our next session is December 4th. Like I said, if you want to join, my email address is on the presentation slide there. Feel free to request to join. We'll be actually having Brian Mitchell and some of his team from the Northeast region speak on a deer management and forest management plan that will impact the entire Northeast region. So if you are a Northeast region partner or tribal partner at agency, you're going to want to be on this next call, because I think it will be really insightful as to what we're doing. And that's another thing, is that this forum has given me the capacity to share out projects from throughout the United States. While my job is within the Northeast region, I'm able to keep this partnership going throughout the regions, and it's been really valuable.
Right. Well, thank you. And we did just post Maria's contact information in the chat on YouTube. So if you're interested in learning more about the working group, you can reach out to her to get connected and get the calendar invites. So far, we haven't had any questions come in. So I think with that, Maria, we will wrap up, and thank you for sharing your time with us today. We really appreciate hearing about the working group, and we hope all of you can join us again in the new year. We'll be taking a break for December. We'll start off the new year on January 15th at 3 p.m. hearing about the Native Youth Community Adaptation Leadership Program, which I'll be speaking on. So hopefully you'll join us and hear about how you can help us recruit young Indigenous leaders into the conservation field. And as a reminder, each broadcast is recorded and available on NCTC's website. So if you wish to learn more about the broadcast series, be added to the listserv, or if you have ideas that you'd like to learn more about, please email me. It's Jennifer_Hill, HILL, @fws.gov. And we thank you for joining us today.